All right, let's see what we've got here. Comments. There we go. Okay, so here's a comment by Yoso on how I became amoral. I think it's a he. He said, "There's a good chance me is just an illusion as well. No me to be moral, good or bad, however the story may go. There appears to be that which is being presented, everything else just a story." So that this is like the self is an illusion, pseudo-profundity. And so I said, an illusion can only exist to a subject who experiences it. The concept of an illusion presupposes subject, object, and representation. So the self is an illusion is self-negating. There can be no illusion without a self. Then there's one by Rock Climbing Hacks. And this guy is a real strange person. I looked at his channel. The first video on his channel is, no, not the first one now, but the first video I saw was how to make a disposable trail bidet for free. And his disposable trail bidet is a water bottle with a knife cut in it. Yeah, kind of an odd chap. Anyway, so he said, and this is on the Principle of Insufficient Reason. He said, "I didn't watch the video. I don't have a reason why, but I presume that's okay with you, given the title." And I said, "Yeah, I don't think anyone cares what you do." And then he said, "I wish that were so, but it seems they care a lot when I don't wear a mask or get a vax. Besides, your argument is not that nobody cares, but rather that it doesn't matter why one does what one does." Which, of course, is not my argument in that video, but anyway. I said, "You don't know what my argument is because you didn't watch the video. Or did you already forget that?" And then I said, "You're obviously not smart enough to understand the actual philosophical issues here, so just stop wasting my time with dumb jokes." Then here's another comment on the Principle of Insufficient Reason by Aditya BSRK. He said, "Trust reason to the extent it gives results." And I said, "You need to use reason to make that judgment." And then he said, "The point isn't to transcend reason. The point is to transcend faith in reason. By trusting reason to the extent it gives results, we put limits and curtail our faith in reason." So he didn't get the point, right? He just missed the point entirely. I said, "You're missing the point. To the extent it gives results is a judgment generated by your mental processes. That judgment depends on reason. Whether you have faith in reason or not is irrelevant. If you question reason or doubt reason, you do so with reason. You don't have a higher standard that you can use to judge reason." All right, then on the same video, StateoftheNihil said, "Concepts are representations. If your go-to question about them is, do they exist, then you're not asking the right question. If we're talking about representations, then the obvious question is, do they represent?" This is something that comes up in debates about transgender people. They think that pointing out that the concept of woman is not out there somehow translates to it being an arbitrary grouping that bears no relation to reality. As for the lack of grounding, I would say that our beliefs are grounded by our embodied experience. It's not a foundation, given that experience is not a belief, but what we map our beliefs to. But it's not arbitrary. We can't just not experience things. To use your language, it is our nature. What is arbitrary is the normative component, where I have chosen to select beliefs that represent this experience. Well, I wouldn't say that's arbitrary either, because it's not like you just arbitrarily choose representations or beliefs to represent experience. You do that based on underlying mechanism that is based on principles, right? So it's not arbitrary. It's your nature. So both experience and reason are part of your nature. They're not arbitrary, but they are questionable, they are dubitable, and thus they cannot provide the kind of foundation that religious people are demanding or insisting that they somehow have, and that the atheist is lacking. Okay, then he said, we can understand what it means for our beliefs to represent, and this is objective in the sense that it is accurate. Well, I wouldn't say it's objective, it's... Then he says we can then arbitrarily choose to follow this course or reject it. Well, we're not arbitrarily choosing. Accuracy is a judgment. It's not something we have access to, independent of our own selves, like independent of our brains. We don't have access to an objective standard of accuracy. So, so I don't really understand what he's saying there, but I guess I sort of agree with most of it, but maybe not with the last part there. Right, then here's another comment by Torin McCabe. He said, the grounding of logic is that we live in an ordered universe. We have no answer on why the universe is ordered or why it is ordered in the way it is. Animal life arose from the universe and also follows some ordering principles. Humans have some ability to explain the universe and human behavior based on patterns and order, the nature of the universe and the nature of humans. And humans also have some ability to accept or reject those explanations. But what about grounding? But what about materialism? But what about nominalism? But what about transcendentals and abstractions? My explanation already details this. Universe, patterns, matter, life, behavior, explanations. Yeah, so basically, there is order in the universe. Our brains reflect some of that order. We can then construct representations using those brains. Those brains then abstract representations to contain some of the order of reality. And then that order that they contain is used to generate behavior that works in that reality. And this is an account of the human condition. And it's a perfectly adequate account. And it's not absolutely guaranteed to be true, because it denies that we would ever have the ability to absolutely guarantee any truth. But it doesn't say that we are totally without any basis for making judgments. So yeah, I think this is perfectly reasonable, but the demand for absolute certainty, there's this like false dichotomy that you must have absolute certainty. Like, I know 100% that logic works and that it's right and that my beliefs are correct, or I just have no ability to make judgments and I just don't know if I should go left or right or shoot myself in the head or have a hamburger. I just can't make any judgments now. Yeah, it's stupid. We can make judgments without having absolute certainty, without having some kind of absolute foundation. That's our condition. That's the way we are. Okay, then Dave Skeet, on the same video, The Principle of Insufficient Reason, said, your videos about theism are always pretty good and are very helpful to me personally. I'm starting to get into philosophy and they are a very good starting point. So thank you. My theory is that the internet is filled with midwits who argue purely from rhetoric and have great difficulty thinking logically. The people you're responding to in this are very tiresome. Well, I mean, what they do is they come up with a kind of language game that they all agree on, and then they think that this language game is reason itself, or that it's very persuasive to people outside of their community. So they sort of fool themselves into thinking that they're thinking instead of just regurgitating rhetoric. Okay, the next one is by 86 Maldoror 86 on the same video, The Principle of Insufficient Reason. He said, wouldn't the ordering structure and function of the brain constitute for a preceding and or non-brain-centric source of logic/reasoning for it to form and evolve within beings in the first place, i.e. the arrangement of quantum, atomic, chemical, and crystalline structures following a system of rudimentary logic which preceded the existence of our brain? Chaos can't be thingified or conceptualized by the brain without making it into something other than chaos. Likewise, we can't have logic and reasoning without the presence of identity and the capacity for relation between systems. Okay, so I think what he's trying to say is that doesn't the existence of logic/reasoning in a brain imply that there is some I guess you could say that reality is ordered rationally, that this logic or reason exists outside the brain? And I think the simple answer to that is no. Here's what I would say. Order must exist, but that doesn't mean that it has exactly the same form as our reason or logic. It must be possible for our brains to capture some of the order of reality in order to think and act in the world. So we can assume, or we can infer from our own existence as thinking beings, that there is order in the world, and that at least our reason or our representational capabilities are able to capture some of that order. But that's all we can know. We can't know the underlying nature of the order, and the fact that, like he's talking about quantum, atomic, chemical, crystalline structures. Well, I wouldn't say they follow a logic. I would say that we can model them using a model that involves space, time, causality, forces. And of course, that model we are going to manipulate with thought. So in other words, we're going to, logic is sort of a subset of thought, or a kind of simplification of thought to, binary truth values and, kind of perfect matching and so on. But anyway, so no, I don't think that that's the same thing. Whatever the real order is, that could be something quite different from what's in our heads, what's in our brains when we're born. There's no way for us to know the ultimate order of the universe. And I think it's a mistake to call it reason or logic, because reason and logic refer to thought processes taking place in a brain, or you could say in a subject, and it doesn't really make sense to conceptualize the order of the universe in that way. It's one of these mysteries, right? We have many, many little things, and they all seem to... I guess what I mean by saying that the universe is ordered is that the information of it is compressible, that it's not entirely chaotic, that, this part of the universe is kind of like that part of the universe. So if I know about this part, I also know about that part. And this event doesn't just occur once, it occurs over and over and over again. So if I've seen it once, then I can recognize it a second time and a third time and so on. So I guess you could say that this kind of general and specific distinction exists in reality, and it must for our minds to have any grasp on reality. But that's not saying very much, right? And we still don't know what's really going on. And when you get down to quantum theory, the claims that are made by quantum theory are kind of weird. Or the interpretations of it are kind of weird, and the mathematics doesn't really have an intuitive interpretation. In a sense, it defies our logic to make sense out of that. So it might be that our reason only works at a certain level, and below that level, we can't understand reality. I'm not so sure. I don't know, but anyway, I'm not saying... I understand what you're saying. I think this is a bit of a leap. I think you're going a little bit too far in saying that, well, this crystal is reason because it has order. No, it just has order, and reason can grasp order, and so order must be graspable by reason, at least to some extent. But that doesn't mean that we have fully grasped it, or that, it couldn't be compressed further if we really understood it. So, yeah. That was a tough one to respond to, partly because it was worded in a kind of confusing way, but also because it's a pretty deep question, right? Like, what can we infer, if anything, about reality from our subjective state and our apparent ability to make sense of reality? What does the mind tell us about reality? Okay, the next one is by Planci Acanthaster. He said, I think videos by BG that are shorter than 1 hour are insufficient. Thank you for the compliment. All right, Bingo Bongo said on the same video, The Principle of Insufficient Reason, he said, I think these types of debates where both parties run in their own circles because both just don't understand each other. This is because language is gay and lying. Gay and lying. People just miss each other's points and only understand their own argument. Well, it is possible to communicate with other human beings. I don't think it's impossible. It's made more difficult by the fact that people don't want to understand your argument. They want to win a pissing contest, right? So there is very little good faith debate on the internet. Mostly there's some ulterior motive that is not truth-seeking or rationality. But it's something like, oh, I want to show off, or I want to advertise myself, or I want to pwn you so I can feel cool, or something like that. So, yeah, but it is possible if people are willing to put in the effort to carefully work out what they mean and converge on a common understanding and an understanding of where they disagree. But when you get down to that point, though, at some point somebody's got to give, right? Because there can only really be one winner in a debate. If it's a good faith debate, both sides can't walk away and say they won. And so when people lose, they tend to abandon reason and go into something else where they can't lose. Like, they can't lose if they're just tactical nihilists, or if they just don't understand your point, or if they substitute a straw man for it. So people will do all kinds of things to avoid losing a debate, but that doesn't mean that we can't ever have real debates, real discussions. And I have had quite a few real discussions and debates with people in good faith, and I have changed people's minds. So it's not, this very negative attitude toward reason and persuasion, I think, is a little bit... it's a little bit of a cop-out, this idea that we're stuck in our heads, we can never reach across that boundary between minds and change somebody's mind and all that. Yeah, it is possible to do it. Okay, this one is by Annie D. I'm assuming it's a guy, it might be a girl, but I assume it's a guy. He said, nice video, keep up the good work. I particularly loved your refutation of AN and Gary's ideology, which is even worse than regular AN in terms of its arrogance and biases. Hope you have a nice day. Well, thank you. I just want to clear something up, though. I am not, anti-natalism. I am not anti-apholism. I don't approach these things in this way. Like, well, I don't like the conclusion, so I'm going to find a way to fight against it. And I'm also not anti-inmendum. I can certainly criticize inmendum, and I think he has put on a very poor display lately of dealing with critics, and in his responses to me, he was just lying. He was just spewing bullshit, and that's not really impressive. So he's not able to get into a good faith debate. He just can't handle that, I guess. But I do think Emendum has made some good points as well. And I don't attack F-lism because I'm afraid of it or because I don't like the conclusion, and I don't even really attack it. I just think it's an interesting point in the space of ideas, and I don't agree with it, but my disagreements with it are quite different from most people's disagreements with it. Most people disagree with it just intuitively, emotionally. They don't like the conclusion. It just feels wrong. And they have an implicit assumption that if it feels wrong, well, then there must be some rational argument against it. But that's not necessarily the case. Something could feel very wrong to you, but there might not be a rational argument against it. And most of the critics of F-lism or antinatalism would not agree with me on most things. So, yeah. So, I mean, it's just, like, there is this tendency for people to form into ideological tribes and fight and then, assume that everybody's playing that game. And so if you're against their enemy, then you're on their team or something. But I'm just trying to be rational. I'm just analyzing things, critiquing them. My appeals are made to rationality. F-lism is lacking a foundation, of course, like everything else. It claims to have a foundation. So I've pointed out that altruism and hedonism are not self-evident truths. But this is not just an attack on F-lism. This is an attack on humanism. This is an attack on leftism. This is an attack on almost everybody's worldview. Right? So when I disagree with F-lism, I'm not just disagreeing with F-lism. I'm disagreeing with almost everybody. All right, on the Nihilist and the Carpenter, Slender Main said, I'm not really sure if this is making fun of nihilism or if this is Taoism. And I replied, neither. Because it's neither. It's not making fun of nihilism and it's not Taoism. It's pointing out that we don't have a foundation. And that the absence of a foundation does not mean that we must just flail our arms around in the air and do nothing. That nihilism is compatible with any course of action. Okay, and then there is another... I saw a comment by Britannic Antics, which made me laugh. All right, then there is another comment by Slender Main on Spring 2021 comments. He said, you should keep in mind that just because you don't reproduce yourself doesn't mean you haven't passed on your genes. If you don't have kids but help your brother reproduce by hooking him up with a cute date, you have succeeded in passing on your genes because your family shares a large portion of your genes. Well, yes, you share almost all of your genes with almost every human. Then he says, if you sacrifice yourself to save 9 random people, you are also biologically successful because humans share 98% of the same genes. So this is false, but this is based on this thinking about the purpose of reproduction as being copying genes or increasing the frequency of genes or something like that, rather than just reproducing. And then Britannic Antics made a point that I have made before, which is kind of funny. He said, if that were true, sacrificing yourself to save a worm farm would make you very successful. Life forms are not selected for the purpose of maximizing their genes. They are selected to reproduce. If you get outbred even by your siblings, then their phenotype is being selected over yours to the extent that it is any different. That certainly doesn't constitute reproductive success. So, yeah. All right, I'm going to stop it here and I'll pick it up later. My voice is really hoarse today. So, I have to take a break and then maybe I'll do some more later.